As we mentioned earlier, there have been a lot of calls in recent days to defund police, reallocate portions of policing budgets for other community-based programs. Here in Boston, Mayor Marty Walsh said today he's having ongoing discussions about reforms as well as finances, but that the problems we're seeing in this country are not that simple.
I mean, cutting the budget, just cutting the budget, doesn't solve anything. Cutting the budget doesn't deal with racism. Cutting the budget doesn't deal with systemic issues. That doesn't resolve anything. I think that what I've heard, and I heard from some of the councilors yesterday, it's not just about cutting the budget, it's about how do we redirect some of the money potentially into other areas. And I think that that's the conversation.
Or at least it's part of the conversation, because there's a lot to talk about when it comes to the pervasive racism that runs through American society and what we need to do to root it out. It's a conversation that for weeks now protesters have been calling on the rest of us to participate in, particularly people who look like me, many of whom are privileged enough to just now be grappling with the extent of the problem Black Americans have been dealing with for centuries. I'm joined now by Tina Opie. As you know, Tina's a professor of management at Babson, whose program Shared Sisterhood facilitates tough conversations about race and feminism in the workplace. We're also joined by Beth Livingston, a collaborator on Shared Sisterhood and an assistant professor of management at the University of Iowa. Beth, good to meet you. Tina, great to see you. Thanks both for being here.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, thanks.
Tina, if I can start with you, a lot of people feel this time is different. So can we talk about how we get from here to the finish line? Shared Sisterhood talks about how women who are different can work together to get to equity, whatever that means. The majority of African Americans who have been on this show and on my radio show in the last several weeks have said, don't ask me what you white people should be doing. You go figure it out and do it. Seems to me there's a conflict there. Who's right?
We both are, right? So Shared Sisterhood is the idea that in order for us as a collective, women, to make collective advance, we have got to focus on some hard truths. And as I've said on your show, and as some of your other guests have probably said, when we're engaging in conversations about racism, it can often be challenging for some white Americans to wrestle with that. And so the idea of Shared Sisterhood is we help white women dig into their racial attitudes, understand about their own racial identification, which for many of them, this is the first time they've even considered the fact that they do have a racial or ethnic background. So they've never discussed that. And then once they've done that deep diving and that introspection, we can try to bridge with people who are different with them to try to move forward.
You know, Beth, it seems to me that white people, speaking for myself, I haven't been authorized to speak for all white people at this stage, we're uncomfortable being uncomfortable. We don't want to talk about racism. We don't want to talk about white supremacy. I spoke to a fellow Iowan today, Jennifer Harvey from Drake, who's written a book about how do you talk to your white kids. And she said, we're comfortable saying that we're colorblind, that we see people as equal, but then we retreat into what she calls white silence. How do we break the silence?
You know, I think that Tina made a good point when she talked about being comfortable, being uncomfortable. We're really not often, just I think as human nature, comfortable with uncomfortable ideas. And I think we have to get comfortable with that. We have to be able to say, I'm okay not knowing the answer to this question. I'm okay saying I don't know and seeking out more answers. Yeah. And I'm okay telling my kids, I don't know, you're right. Let's figure that out together. And I think that it's that sort of uncertainty and feeling comfortable embracing that uncertainty that will help us move forward. And that's what we're trying to do.
But, you know, Tina, if it was as simple as that, we would have done it. But it's easy to hear Beth's words and yours, but having them break through and then have those discussions. I mean, you wrote a Facebook post that I saw a couple of days ago. You said your colleagues who you say are supportive of diversity and equity and against racism, they said virtually nothing to you about what's going on. If those people couldn't broach a conversation with you, how are those of us who are truly uncomfortable going to do what Beth suggested a minute ago?
So that's a great question. And Jim, what I'll say is this. When I made that post, many of my colleagues said, you know what, Tina, I was thinking about you. I just didn't know what to say. I didn't have the language to say it. I wasn't comfortable. So there's the idea of discomfort again. They weren't comfortable reaching out. So I guess what I'm saying is, as Beth says, feeling discomfort occurs for all of us. I was uncomfortable making that post because I knew that it was going to make public some private conversations or thoughts that I had, private thoughts or private conversations that I'd had. In order for us to move forward, I think all of us are going to have to be uncomfortable. The status quo is comfortable, but we see that that's killing people. And so we have got to get a little bit more comfortable with the notion in order to make advance, we're going to have to get uncomfortable.
So, Beth, are there tricks of the trade? Are there sort of entry points? Is it more education? Is it what is an entry point to get you started, I guess is what I'm saying.
The first thing that I like to do is think about the emotions you feel. So actually, I think in general, we're pretty bad at that, at acknowledging our own emotions, whether we're scared, whether we're angry, whether we're proud. I mean, we don't like acknowledging we have emotions. I mean, think about how many times we're like, oh, I'm completely rational with no emotions whatsoever. We all have them. And I think the first thing is acknowledging what our emotions are and understanding what your typical emotion is. What's your go-to? Do you get mad a lot? Do you get angry with yourself? Do you cry? Are you sad? What are those feelings you have, and really be honest about it. And the second thing that I often do is I do a lot of role playing, and I think it's really important for me, for someone who doesn't like uncertainty, I don't like change, and I do a lot of role playing with friends, colleagues, and myself in my head.
Tina, are you convinced that people are ready for this conversation? It isn't like George Floyd. Like we can't do a Captain Renault when he walked into Rick's Cafe in Casablanca and say, I'm shocked that white cops are killing unarmed black men. We've known that for quite a while. Are we ready to do what you both seem to think we're much more able to do than I do? Well,
let me give you a statistic. So before I posted a video that I made where I was encouraging white women to engage in Shared Sisterhood, our Shared Sisterhood Facebook page had 30 members, and that was intentional. I wanted to keep it a small community. In 5 days, it grew 100-fold. We have over 3,000 people who are actively engaging in these conversations. We will give them opportunities we have case studies. We will redirect them so that they're actually engaging in Shared Sisterhood, which is about building authentic relationships, not just opining on your particular opinion. And it seems to be working. I mean, people are actually having breakthroughs in the sense that they're saying, you know what, I didn't even realize that as a liberal or a progressive, I held those kinds of attitudes. Thank you for creating a space for me to be honest and authentic, to bring some of those private conversations into the public square where we can examine them and then hopefully build something together.
So the bottom line is, don't listen to cynics like me. Listen to people who are hopeful like Opie and Livingston, I guess. I'm sorry to cut this off, but we are short on time. Tina Opie and Beth Livingston, I'd like to continue this soon if you have time. So thanks so much for it, and hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Beth.
Bye.